This is Ken Hance, best storyteller in Texas, saying of the day, a problem is a great chance to do your best. Duke Ellington said that. And, I mean, he's right on target. And that anytime you're thinking about a problem being, just can't solve this, you can. And you can come out ahead by doing so. And how many times in life have we found something we felt like it was insurmountable, and we took the problem head on and solved it? So I welcome your chance to do that. My friend and employee, Glenn Hunt, passed away recently, and had a memorial service for him on Saturday, and I spoke. Glenn was the best employee I ever had. And I told him at the memorial, all my employees that were there tied for second, trying to be diplomatic. But Glenn, he got to work first. He left last. He made sure that every letter sent to the congressman was answered, and that every phone call was answered. He made sure the trains ran on time, and did a great job as chief of staff. He started out working for me. I was paying him $12,000 a year in 1979. We started in January of 79, and by June, July, he had tripled his salary, and he was chief of staff. He was that good. And no one on the staff got upset about it. They realized how good he was. And so it was good to have him as an employee. He trained a lot of people. I'd get somebody and I'd turn them over to him, and he'd train them and do an excellent job. He had a deal I mentioned at the memorial service that I'd hired a guy named Lee Parsley, who was originally from Shallowater, who's an outstanding lawyer in Austin, one of the top lawyers in the state on civil litigation. And he worked for me about a week. He was traveling with me, and he's always a step slow. And that I told Glenn he's not going to make it. We're going to have to make a change. And Glenn said, well, give him a little more time. Give him another week. So one of the things I always said, you got to anticipate what's happening. You got to be ahead of what I'm doing. You got to do it ahead of time. And we were in Brownwood, Texas, and one of the things he had to do is, get out of the car, get the stuff, lock the door. And he got out so fast, he locked me in the car. And I thought, he's caught on. And Glenn had talked to him, and he turned out to be, second best employee. And he also spoke at the funeral, did a good job. But Glenn Hunt made sure that things were done right. He never tried to influence me in any way. He thought that I got elected by the people in that district, and my votes, those were items between me and my voters. He didn't try to get me to do this or that or anything. Now, if I asked him, what do you think? He would tell me. But he didn't volunteer or try. There are a lot of kids get in a position for a representative, a senator, or congressman, or senator, and they try to put their influence on it. I always told them, you're not elected. You're appointed. You didn't have to walk through Muleshoe and Lamesa passing out cards, And so the person that is elected is going to make that decision. I had a girl one time that's lobbyist told me that she had more influence than a member of Congress. And I said, you can't be serious saying that. Yeah, she was serious. And you don't have a vote on the floor. You're not more powerful than a congressman. You don't have a vote on the floor. But in tribute to Glenn Hunt, he was an outstanding employee, and he was head of government department over at Austin Community College, ACC, after he worked for me and John Sharp, who was comptroller. John had him in several positions and found he was truly outstanding. I saw a survey last week, and it talks about funerals and what people preferred. And the number one thing was just a regular coffin and a funeral. And second was their ashes being distributed somewhere. But at the bottom, there is a Viking funeral. And I'd never heard of a Viking funeral, so I looked it up. And a Viking funeral is where they put your dead body in a boat, a little bitty wooden boat, and fill it with a lot of gasoline and take you out and then shoot an arrow that's flaming into the boat so your body burns up at sea. Well, Massachusetts, and they didn't want to give a permit to do that, and I understand why. Lots of times a boat would sink, before everything was taken care of. It'd come up on the beach, and people would complain about it. So in most places, if you want a Viking funeral, most places in the United States, you can't get a Viking funeral. So don't ask for one. I don't know what the appeal is, but I can guarantee you I would not ask for a Viking funeral. This time of year, Little League's starting. Everybody's excited. It's like a legislature in Congress. Everybody's excited for it to start. And when it ends, they're ready for it to be over with. They've had all they can take. Little League, one of the big controversies now, people and parents yelling at the umpires and getting in fights. I saw a clip the other day of a guy tackling an umpire and trying to beat him up. It's a game, folks, for Little League, for little kids to have fun. Remember that. But this town in New Jersey has come up with an idea. If you badmouth the umpires, then you either got to leave or you got to sign up to umpire for 3 games. We'll find out how much you know. Most of them don't know the rules. I was watching one of my grandsons play basketball when he was probably 10 or 11. And a kid on the other team got hurt, but they were on defense. He hurt his leg or something. It wasn't. And his mother kept screaming, stop the game, stop the game. You can't stop the game when a defensive player is claiming he's hurt, because if you did that, every time they got beat on a fast break, they'd claim they were hurt. And she was really upset, but didn't know the rules. So, don't be complaining when you don't know the rules. And if you complain at this little town in New Jersey, you're going to wind up being the umpire. And you'll find out real quick that that's not a lot of joy. But the real purpose in Little Leagues is for everybody to have a good time. And so I always tell parents, don't get carried away. The Texas Rangers and the Houston Astros are not going to be scouting this game. Maybe a little later they might scout something, but they're not going to be scouting this game. So, move on. You'll always have some kids that you need to play. You need to play everybody. If you play everyone, you're going to be a lot better off. But there's some of them are bench warmers. And we had a kid on my son's team one time, Dial Mayfield, and looked out in left field, and Dial had turned around away from the crowd, but he was going to the bathroom. The other team had scored and scored, and it was a long inning. And every time I'd see him after that, after he was grown in college, I'd always remind him, great guy. I'm sure, I don't know what he's doing now, but I bet he's doing well. But he just turned his back. You could tell what was happening, and turned his back to the crowd and got after it. And I yelled at his dad, look at Dial. He just shook his head. So unusual things happen. When I was in the Little League at Dimmitt, I kept trying to let him, let me pitch. I wanted to pitch. And we had a guy, he's deceased now, Hal Ratcliffe, was a great athlete. Well, he is 6 feet tall when he's 12 years old. And so we'd have to take his birth certificate with us when we'd go places. And he had a fastball. I mean, he'd scare those little kids to death with his, fastball. They'd get to the back of the batter's box. They didn't want any part of it. They didn't want to get hit with that ball. But he was our pitcher, and they had he encouraged him to let me pitch one time. And we were playing Hell Center, and I got up there to pitch, and it didn't start real good. I threw 15 straight balls. I loaded the bases, and was 3-0 on the guy that was up there. I threw another fastball at him, and it was going to his head, and he ducked, you know. And when he ducked, the bat was behind his back, and the ball hit the bat. I mean, it was a fluke deal. It went about 2 feet, and I went up there and got the ball and tagged him, tagged the guy from third coming in, and everybody's yelling everything. And the guy from second, Little League, they get confused. Guy from second came in and ran over me, and I didn't drop the ball, so it's a triple play, unassisted triple play. They never let me pitch again. They said, don't even walk by. They wouldn't let me walk by the pitcher's mound. You go around it, don't get close to it. The thing about Little League, I always tell kids that what you've got to look at every time the ball is thrown, you got to say, what do I do if it comes to me? Because sometimes in Little League, somebody will be playing and a ball come to them and they'll look around. You're trying to figure out where to throw it. So, it teaches you to anticipate, which is good. Week before last, the Highway Patrol in Florida pulled a guy over, and he had a plastic bag with some material in it, and asked him what it was, and he said it was chili pepper that somebody in Guatemala had sent him. And they arrested on some other charges, but the Highway Patrol lab technician ran a test on it, and instead of being chili pepper, it was heroin. A little difference there. And he got arrested, and that was his defense. And they had another case in the same state, same week, where a guy was arrested with a crack pipe in his pants. And his lawyer filed a motion that they were not his pants. And he had been visiting somebody and spilled something on his pants, and he borrowed some pants from them and didn't realize that a crack pipe was in the pocket. I would think one would realize if a crack pipe was in the pocket. Not my pants defense does not work, especially in Florida. NASA had a survey that the best nap that you can take is approximately 26 minutes. And I'll take a nap lots of times after lunch, and they're about 15 to 30 minutes. If you get over 30 minutes, you get real groggy the rest of the day. But 15, 20, 25 minutes is pretty good, and allows you to kind of recharge your battery. South Korean President Yoon was here this last week, and was kind of hit at the White House when he sang Don McLean's song "American Pie," "The Day the Music Died." It's about Buddy Holly.
A long, long time ago, I still remember how that music used to make me smile. Something touched me deep inside the day the music died.
He was quite a hit. He came over, he's trying to help his lagging numbers in the polls in South Korea, and did a good job at Congress because he spoke about, the problems with China and everything. But they have a lot of problems in their own government, especially in the judicial system, and not having due process. And so, it'd be interesting to see if they follow up with real due process in the future in their jurisdictional proceedings. Another thing that came up last week, a guy in California went through a divorce. And it was one of those bad divorces, and it was very hostile. And his wife hired a witch to put a curse on him. And he was having flat tires, and his, shirt would rip at the dry cleaners and everything. So he hired a psychic to try to, bring something good in and break the curse. And she gave him, I think it's $5,000. For $5,000, she gave him a crystal and told him to pray with that crystal. He did, and it didn't help at all. So he sued her. He'd sued her 2 times earlier. Now, why? I didn't understand, and it didn't really tell all the fact that why did you go back to her if you sued her and she didn't do a good job, you know, why did you go back? I mean, it goes back to the first saying I taught my children: a fool and their money are soon parted. And but he filed suit and he didn't win. But he said that he hired her and paid her $5,100, and she didn't get the curse removed. That the witch, when you go through a divorce case and you hire a witch to put a curse on the other party, I mean, you got more problems than just the divorce, you know. So try to go back to that old statement: bury the dead and move on. And the marriage was dead. It's time you move on instead of hiring people with a curse. As a young lawyer in Lubbock, I got a call one time, and there was a guy. His wife was in jail, and she was a fortune teller. I didn't realize it was illegal to tell fortune at that time. Is against a vagrant statute. And his first retainer guy I ever had, he paid me $10 a month to be able to call me, you know, get her out of jail for telling fortune. And she'd read people's palms, and evidently she was pretty good because there'd be a lot of people, you know, come into town. And when she'd come into town, she'd run a little ad. Let me read your palm. I've never been down that road, but there's some people, you know, they look at your horoscope, they look at all kinds of things. I think you have to get up and get after it, whatever job that you've got. But the people that tell fortunes and were mystic readers, it was illegal at one time in Texas. Nancy Reagan looked at horoscopes, and she got into an argument with Don Regan. And Don Regan was the Secretary of Treasury. I dealt with him a lot. Don Regan was a tough guy to deal with. He thought he was a 4-star general, and everyone else in the world was a first-class private. And he was arranging the schedule when he swapped jobs with Jim Baker. Jim Baker had been chief of staff, and they moved Baker over to the Department of Treasury and moved Reagan over to chief of staff for President Ronald Reagan. And so he was working on the advanced schedule, and they'd send a copy to the First Lady. She called him and said that she didn't want the president traveling on such and such day. It was a bad day, looking at the horoscopes and everything, looking at the stars. It's a bad day. Don't travel that day. And he said, well, I'm just trying to explain this to you. And he got into an argument with her, and he hung up on her. And he called Mike Deaver and said, what should I do? I had to hang up on her. She just, she's wrong. She's being crazy. And Deaver said, you ought to call back and apologize. The president's going to listen to her. So he called her back and apologized and said what I was trying to get across to you, and did it again, and he hung up on her again. And the next day he was fired. He made it through that night, and I'm sure she told Ronnie, as she called him, the president, and, there's a lot of things you could do, but getting in fight with the First Lady was, wasn't going to work, and Reagan got fired. He was a guy that would talk down to the members of Congress and then wonder why he couldn't get along with them. So he was an unusual guy and had been very successful on Wall Street, and it made a lot of money. But his people skills, his bedside manner was not good. He was lacking in that regard. I think a bedside manner, and that's one of the things when you interview at a medical school, they're looking at that. They're looking at, what kind of bedside manner. We had Dr. Cogswell in Dimmitt, and Dr. Cogswell was really the only doctor there in town for a while. And then they got 2 or 3, had a surge. And but Dr. Cogswell I had an uncle, and he told him, said, you got cancer. And my uncle said, well, I want a second opinion. Dr. Cogswell said, okay, you're ugly. And that wasn't the second opinion he wanted. Cogswell thought he was a part-time comedian. And, when people are there about their health, they don't find it amusing and funny. Dr. Cogswell also, my dad went to see him about something, and he was he was having problems with his elbow and a skin rash around his elbow and everything. And the Dr. Cogswell said, "Raymond, have you ever had this before?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, it looks like you got it again." Yeah, I think he finally gave him some medicine, hope that it'd help. Good luck. You're on your own. I had a friend that was a doctor out in Marfa, Texas. And he had a guy come in, prominent citizen. He came in and he had a STD, sexually transmitted disease. And he hated to tell the guy, but he had to tell him. And he told him, said, "You've got a condition in the area of private parts that's we call boll weevils. And it's little boll weevils. And you got to take this medicine and everything." And so he told him that, and he saw him a little later and said, what happened, and everything. And he said, "Yeah, it's okay." He said, "Those boll weevils about to eat me up." And he said, "I'm sure glad that you got me that medicine." It was a shampoo that he had to use. And but he said he didn't know if the guy ever caught on or not. My old friend Spider, his first wife, when he was young, he was 18, she was 24. There's a lot of difference in an 18-year-old guy and a 24-year-old gal. He should have known. And she had a tattoo, back when nobody had tattoos. And it was a tattoo of a man naked, but it had a ribbon that covered the private parts, and the ribbon said "Daddy," And but they got to checking on her and got a private eye, and she was evidently moving around pretty good. They lived in Corpus, and she was actively involved with that. They could document 7 different guys that she had been sleeping with. And he told his parents about it, and he was crying, and he said, "Daddy, she's, sleeping with everybody. I'm cleaning this up. She's sleeping with everybody in Corpus." And his dad, who was the world's greatest optimist, said, "Corpus not that big. If it Dallas or Houston, that'd be a real problem." And so we always, when something's a little tough or something, we'll say, "Well, Corpus not that big." It's kind of like the old joke about why did Oklahoma put on their license plate, "Oklahoma is okay." And the reason is they couldn't spell adequate, and I apologize to my friends in Oklahoma for saying that. I'm just kidding. But it's a great state. Boone Pickens, I got him to laugh at that. Oklahoma State, they have a great baseball park. I mean, for college baseball, there's some good ones. UT's got a good one. A&M, Texas Tech, they've all got good facilities. Oklahoma State's really they got great suites. And, if you put suites in a basketball arena or in a football field, you're going to make some money because you can sell those suites. My wife, we got a suite. We kept our tickets. We had 6 tickets on the 45-yard line out, and we kept those and went to the suite, and she could have a glass of wine, watch a game, move around, and never went back to the seats outside. Just abandoned them. They were gone. If somebody went to a game with me, children, everything, you had to stay to the end of the game. If the score was 56-0 for us or against us, you had to stay last play. And my wife Susie and a friend of mine, Don Bethel, who was mayor of La Mesa for many years, they were at a football game with me, and they wanted to leave. It's cold. And it was getting cool. But I think it's probably in the 50s or 60s. And they've told that story, and the more they tell it, the last time they told it, it was in the teens. that they had frostbite. I mean, that people get on a story like that, and especially if they're picking on you, it had frostbite from being at the stadium and having to wait out until the game was over. Remember, saying of the day, a problem is a chance to do your best. Ken Hance, best storyteller in Texas. Appreciate you listening.